Okay, in this video, we're going to go ahead and cover the Create menu. In Create, we're able to create basically points and line work through existing data. So in Create Plan, we're able to create points by giving it some information as far as how far we want this point to be created from an existing point. For example, for this point, I'm going to put in a distance of 10 feet. I can choose an angle to put this at. I'm going to go ahead and skip this for now. I'm also going to skip elevation. So you always have to give a point a name. I'll just leave it at 115. You can choose whether or not you want to give it a description, and by default, the layer is 0. You can type in a new layer that if you want to set it to, or if you click the list here, you can actually pick one of your existing layers to put this point on. I'm going to go ahead and pick 1A. So I've picked that. I can go back to my map view by jumping out or jumping between the input form button, and if I select this point, it's going to give me a preview of where it's going to place this point. I can rotate this point and basically move the angle of where I want to put it. You'll notice that the angle basically goes 0 is straight up, 90 is to the right, 180 is down, and 270 is directly left. So you can kind of use that to place the point where you want to place it. You can rotate these with the presets, which are preset to 45, 90, and 30 degrees. So I can rotate this every 90 degrees if I needed to, or if I switch back to 45, I can go by 45s. If you do designate your own angle, for example, if we put 22 degrees, it's going to basically put it in a 22-degree angle. Kind of works like the azimuth, so you can use that to however you need to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to 90 degrees, and it's going to go directly right. I can choose whether or not I want a line drawn from my start point here to the point that I'm going to create. So for example, if I have this checked and I click create, it will create a line it'll create a line between the 2 points. If you don't need a line there, you can just continue to create these points. This will automatically increase the point name by 1. So 115 was my first point, and 116 is my next point. 117 is going to be my third point. With this, we can also undo. Hitting the undo button will undo what you just created. So if you've created a bunch of points that you don't need and accidentally, went off in the wrong direction, you can click undo and it will get rid of those points that were created. If you create points and you jump out of this menu, meaning you go into create line work, and then you go back to create plan, the undo option will no longer work. It only works while you're still in the menu you currently are in. Okay, so moving on to line work. And line work will actually let us create points between lines. I'm sorry, let us create lines between points. So if I select these 2 points, it's giving me a dotted line of what that would look like. I can continue my selection to basically go through as many as I need. I can click create and they'll create my lines between those points. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and undo these. So you can create basically line segments between, all these points that you need. And you can use these as boundaries or to represent boundaries or to represent walls. Uh, totally up to you on how you want to use these. Very useful for if you don't have any kind of blueprint and you're kind of building your own. Definitely useful for creating like wall boundaries. We can also create arcs and not just lines. So you can define a radius but in the input form button, and it'll create the arc for you. You can choose which arc you want, whether it's the shorter one or the bigger arc, and you can choose which side you want it on as well with these toggles here. Our next option here is line segmentation, and we can segment lines by either by number of segments or by segment lengths. So with number of segments, if I choose 9 segments, it's going to divide my line into 9 equal segments. So whichever line I select, it'll show me that it's dividing it into 9 equal segments. If I choose segment lengths, it will divide it basically from going from my start point. It will create lengths of 3 feet 6 inches or whatever you put in here. And here you can see here's my start point. So it'll go 3 feet 6 inches all the way up until it can't. And obviously this is going to be too short, so this segment's going to be smaller. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear my selection, and I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this line. So in line work, you can actually select lines and delete them as well. Uh, Note that you can only delete line segments that you've created, so I can't delete, for example, my grid lines or anything from here that's given to me in my model. You can only delete lines that you have created. So moving on to Point Manager. Uh, Point Manager has a lot of options in here. So the first thing that we're going to go over is actually editing a point. So if I select this point here and I select my input form button, I can make some changes to this point. For example, I can change what attributes it has. So if I want to get rid of that and I'm going to change my color to red instead of blue, I can click Apply Edits. And now when I click the information icon and select my point, I can see that all that information has changed. So color is now red and that last attribute has been deleted. Um, you can also move the point. So if you change the XYZ coordinates, you will move the point. Um, I would recommend against this unless you actually know you need to move that point. You know, let's say 2 feet to the right or to the left. If it's 2 feet to the right, you would change your x-axis and you would increase it. If it's 2 feet to the left, you would decrease the x-axis. You can also designate this point as a control point, and what that will do if you check this box and we look back at this point. Whoops, I didn't hit apply edit. So if we check that, uh, so select my point. We're gonna check control point, hit apply edits. So that changes this point into a triangle, so it makes it easy for you to identify a point that you need to stake out versus a point that is a control point. And we can always go ahead and change this back. So if I jump back in here, uncheck control point, hit apply, it's going to go ahead and change it back to a regular point. Um, our next option here is offsets. So we can create point offsets. So I need to select 2 points to create a line. And based on my input in the input form button, I can create some offsets. So I can have a offset of 1 foot, and I'm actually going to go ahead and change this to 2 at an interval of every, I'm going to go ahead and say 4 feet with a start distance of 5 feet. So if I look at my preview here, I can see that here's my start point going this way. There's a start distance of 5 feet, so it skips 5 feet, and it starts my interval of creating points every 4 feet, and I am 2 feet off of this line. Now you can create points either on one side of the line. I know it's kind of hard to see, but there's the previews. So you can create them on one side, you can jump to the other side, or you can have these points on both sides by using this toggle here. We can also create a single point offset. So with a single point offset, basically the only difference is that we don't have an interval. We just have the horizontal offset. We can have a vertical offset and the start distance. So how far do you want to go from your starting point? Um, so that's going to be offset on a line. We can also offset on a arc. So if I select this, it's basically giving me an arc. When you click the input form button, you kind of have the same options here with the exception of radius. So you can also change the radius of your arc to create that. And when we go back here, we can switch between where the start location is. So if I click this first icon here, my start point starts from here. Click it again, it switches to the other side. Once again, you can choose which arc you want, and then you can also choose which side you want it on. Our next option here is going to be create a point between lines. So if I select this here, it basically gives you instructions and tells you select 2 lines and tap between them to preview a center point. So if I select this line here and this line here, and then click somewhere in the center, Anywhere I click in between those lines, it's going to show me where the center point between those two lines is. This is an easy way to create sleeves in a wall if you have one that was missing. I'm going to go ahead and clear my selection. I'm going to go back to point. So we also have this icon here, which will allow us to basically place a point anywhere we click. It will not snap to anything. It's just going to place where you click it. So you can create a point, just basically kind of arbitrary and kind of in space, and use that as a start location for maybe when you're setting up with a blank drawing and you just want a reference point to use. You can do that. I'll go ahead and clear this out. So one more thing we can do is we can actually delete points. So using my selection box, I can select all these points here and I can click delete and it will delete all the points that I've had there. I'm going to go ahead and click undo because I actually need those points. You can also select points by clicking on them, as well as using the in current view icon. So this will select all the points in my current view. So it's found 15 points. And once again, you can delete them or do what you want with them basically. So we can also actually edit multiple points at once. So for example, if I wanted to change the layer of all these points, I can select all of them, go into my input form button, and I can choose layer. So currently it says varies because those points are on different layers. So I can choose and select a new layer for them for all those points to be on a single layer. Whether I type one in and create one, or I can go to my list and pick a new layer for them. And the last thing you can do is you can change the elevation of multiple points. Sometimes contractors like to see their hangers on the floor. They like to see them at a zero elevation. And a lot of times when they come out from the CAD department, they do have elevation on them. So what you can do is you can select all your hangers, go into the input form button, and then change all the elevation to zero. Okay, so moving on to uh, from model. So from model will allow us to create points from our model or from our background objects. For this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn a bunch of these layers off because it's a little crowded. So I'm going to select my grid layer and turn everything else off. And now that I have my grid, I can create points basically by selecting these options here. So if I wanted to create endpoints, I check endpoints and wherever I click, so if I clicked on these two lines, it's created them on the endpoints of the line. So if I select midpoint as well, and I select this line, it's going to create the point at the midpoint of my line. So the line ends at the beginning of the circle around the D. Um, so if I select this line here, even if I click not at the midpoint, it's still going to create it at the midpoint there. And also because I have endpoint selected, it created the endpoint there because it was in the current view. If I uncheck midpoint and select the endpoint here, it also picked up all the endpoints of these lines because I was zoomed out way too much. But we can clear those by selecting them again. Whoops. Let's go ahead and clear these out as well. Um, so if you wanted to create intersections, I can check the intersection box, click on my intersections, and wherever it sees an intersection, it's going to create it. Once again, if you have multiple ones selected and it sees that this line has endpoints and midpoints, it's going to create them as well. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this out, and we're going to go ahead and move on to grid. So grid will allow us to create a grid based on some options we set up with. So if I click my input form icon, I can choose how many columns my grid can have. So I'm going to put in something like 8. And for rows, I want 9 rows. And they're going to be spaced 10 feet on the width. And let's go with 8 feet on the height. So now when I go back to here, to my map view, I can see that here's my grid and here's it is spaced out. You can also assign a start location for it. By default, it jumps to 100. You can pick whatever start location you want. You can choose the grid names that it'll start with. So if you put like G-1, it'll start naming the points going from G-1 all the way up to however many points it creates. You can choose a description for them as well as put them on a layer. Up until you hit create, these are just kind of a preview. So if I do hit create, it's going to go ahead and process, and it's found 72 points. So I have all these points going from, I guess grid 13 was my start point, and I'll go all the way up to grid 72. I'm going to go ahead and undo these because I just don't need all these points in here. And then I'm going to clear my selection. And the last part here is pattern. So we can create a pattern that we can apply to our points. So I'm going to create something pretty simple. So I'm just going to create this pattern here. And once I'm done, I click Add Points. So this allows me to basically create this pattern. I'm going to hit Save Pattern, and I'll just leave it called Pattern 3. So I'll hit Save Pattern again. And what I can do is I can now apply this pattern to points that I have. So I'm going to bring back my all of my points and all of my background. So let's say I have a point that is at the exact center of a column. Obviously, I can't use that, but what I can do is I can take my pattern, and I think mine was pattern 3. I can load it in, and let's say this point here was at the center of a column. If I click on it, it will put all these points around the column. So what you can do is you can have a preset like a 2 foot offset from the center of your column. You can create this pattern, apply it, and now you have basic control points that you can use. All you need to do is actually mark them from the create the offset from the column and mark these points out.